Well, hello, beautiful people. In this video, I'll be sharing what are some of the things that I've learned from my Ketu time period. Now, I never thought I would come back and make videos about Ketu or Ketu time period anymore because I've learned so much from it that I really don't have a reason to revisit it, if that makes any sense. It's helped me out so much. Me learning about astrology, learning about Ketu, and embodying, acknowledging everything, all the lessons that I was meant to learn. It's helped me so much that I really have no reason to revisit that. But the other day, I was reminded of when I started making the initial videos. And for those of you who've been following me on this channel from day one, I know you've been following me, you've been subscribing to me because of the Ketu videos, the videos that I made sharing my experience about what I was going through in this spiritual time period called Ketu time period in astrology. And my intention then was to really share, to, in a way, help people. But what it ended up doing was it helped me. That act of sharing, creating this space for people where all of us could come together and talk about what we were learning, what were some of the things that we were going through, was an incredibly healing thing for me. And I want to thank you all for showing up, for sharing, for listening, for tuning in, trying to understand this with me in your own way, and creating a space that was so incredibly healing. And I think that's why I want to make this video, because in a way I feel like I owe you guys. I owe to keep that conversation going rather than abruptly stop it just because I don't find it beneficial or I don't need it anymore. Let's put it that way, right? And who knows? Maybe this is an ongoing thing. Because I think once you go through Ketu time period, you are forever changed. You are forever defined by it. And here's another thing. I was born in Saturn Ketu. So Ketu will forever be a part of my personality. Let's put it that way. And I'm okay with it. Yeah. So I wrote down some of the things that I want to talk about. I have little notes, but I have a feeling this is going to be a long video because we're not only going to talk about, what I learned from Ketu time period, but also like the transition between Ketu to Venus. And so grab a cup of coffee, tea, chill, and let's talk. Okay, so the first thing that I realized or that I learned is to not judge people. And I know that sounds so superficial, right? Hey, Nyata, you should have known this all along, to not judge people. Like, what were you thinking? Well, it's one of those things. I knew it superficially, like I should not judge people, but I think subconsciously I did, because I held this idea that if someone was not successful in life, it was because they were not trying hard, or they were lazy, or they were not putting in the time or the effort or whatnot, right? Little did I understand that you yourself are not the only factor. There's so many other things that come into who you are and what you do and whether you succeed or you fail. And at no point is that your identity, whether you succeed or you fail, right? None of that is your identity, because even if you're failing in the meantime, it's not just you that is at play. It's so many other external things that came into play. And the same thing with success, right? If you're succeeding in the moment, it's not entirely just your personality and your internal self that made the success happen. It was a lot of external things. And I understand that now. And so I've learned to let go of identifying so much with successes and failures. And, now that Ketu time period is over, it's not that I'm not going to experience failure. Like, I am. That's part of life. But I've learned to not identify with it so much, because the entirety of Ketu time period, everything that I did, I wouldn't say maybe everything, most 90% of the things that I did just completely backfired and did not work. And if I am learning not to internalize that, right? Like not make it a personal flaw or like a character flaw, or take that on as an identity, like I'm a failure. If I'm not going to do that, I cannot do that with the successes either, because guess what? It is not my personality or an internal thing that is making me succeed. So in a way, I've become a lot more humble, and in a way, I've learned to walk that middle path of not being swayed so much by successes and failures and all these transient things are not your identity. It's not who you are. Yeah. Another thing that I've learned is, before I go into that, I want to talk a little bit about how, in Ketu time period, it could be that nothing you do works out, or most of the things you do not work out. I want to speak a little bit about that, because I realize that some of you watching might actively be going through that, and I want to touch upon it. It's kind of like, in life, like if there's like a wall in front of you and you hammer it, you chip away at it and you begin to make some dents, right? You begin to make some progress, and then eventually the wall comes down, right? In life, usually that's how it works. Not so in Ketu time period, my friend. You better stop. You better put the hammer down and then take a step back and sit your butt down and take a step back. Because that logic of, I'm just going to keep going at it, I'm just going to keep doing this, that logic doesn't make sense in Ketu time period. I think that you're meant to just take a step back. I would not say resign from life. I would not say stop trying. I would just say take a slight step back, right? Just a slight step back, and take on like a observational, more detached stance, rather than being actively involved in something, if that makes sense. But once again, you cannot ever resign from life. You cannot check out. You have to actively pursue life. You have to actively pursue connections with people, the things that you want to do in life, but with a hint of detachment. Hint, not complete detachment. Okay, so let's move on to the second thing that I learned. Free will and personal autonomy are so important. Let's put it this way. So if Ketu time period is like a storm, right? Like that's coming and you're like, or is actively here and you're like, well, I'm just going to stay indoors and weather this out. Sure, yes, that would be the smartest thing to do, to be honest. But once the storm passes, you still have to go outside and see what kind of mess it left behind. Okay, you still have to do that. Venus now all of a sudden isn't going to come and clear that up for you. And, I see a lot of people talking about, in this space of astrology, a lot of people talk about, well, Venus came and no change happened. Well, guess what? You might be ignoring this like big component of free will and autonomy. In other words, what are you doing? What kind of action are you taking? It's as simple as that. You cannot let practicality go just because you're in Ketu Mahadasha. You have to be practical, and you have to know within your limited confinement, right, of what you can do and what you cannot do, focus on what you can do, focus on what you want to do. And you don't ever let go of your autonomy, because guess what? That is given by God. And I don't think God ever wants you to give up your autonomy and the free will and your ability, your human ability to help yourself and make things happen and make changes happen in life. Don't ever let that go. That is definitely not what Ketu wants from you. And yes, I understand a little bit of detachment, but remember how we talked about a little bit of detachment, not embodying helplessness. That would be the complete opposite of what spiritual awakening means, or going through the spiritual time period means. Sometimes in life there are, your external world is so chaotic that you have to turn inward, right? And sometimes in life your internal world is so chaotic that you turn outward. Well, what's an example? Okay, so if your external world is chaotic, like if your job, your career, finances, those are not working out, you can turn inward and meditate, sit with yourself, right? Like just be happy in your internal world. And when your internal world is not quite right, like maybe you're having not very pleasant thoughts, go seek connection, go outward, go to nature, go external, right? But in Ketu, when both are chaotic, turn to God. Simple as that. And at the risk of sounding so like woo-woo, spiritual, completely religious, but that's what worked for me. I remember a time when, like the external was completely messed up, but so was my internal. I just could not make sense of a lot that was happening. I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know where to turn to. And I turned to God. And it doesn't mean you have to now all of a sudden be like a what do you call it? Like a monk or a sage. No, it just means that there's a third world. Or like the two worlds, right? Internal world, external world. And there's another world that is not, that's always safe, is what I'm trying to say. When your external world fails you and your internal world fails you, there's another world that will never fail you. That is God. Yeah. And, just the sheer act of just sitting down and listening to the Hanuman Chalisa, that brought so much peace for me that I still chant it to this day, every day. Every day. It's just going to be forever a part of who I am and my daily life, because I found something else, right? Like I thought that who I was in this world was just the external and then the internal, but then I truly found something else that could never fail me, so to speak. Another thing that I learned is to not make any hard and fast rules during Ketu time period, or make decisions that you cannot turn back from or that you cannot undo. Because sorry, I just got a text. The desires that you part ways with during Ketu time period, because it seems appropriate, because that's the phase you're in. Might just come back during Venus time period. And I'll give you a concrete example. And this is the last thing that I want, is to talk about personal experience, or like put out so much of my personal stuff online, because that's just not what I want to do. But I think me giving an example would be beneficial. So I'm going to give you an example. So during Ketu time period, prior to Ketu, I was an actor. I was a social media creator. And finally, in 2019, 2020, I started making good money doing those things. And 2021 is when I was in the middle of my Ketu time period, but 2021 is when I realized I no longer want to do these things. I don't want to create on social media. I don't want to be quote unquote an influencer or whatever. I did not want to act. I did not want to model, all of those things that I was doing, getting paid for. And I thought I was forever done with it, to be honest. The way that desire left me, I thought I was forever done. And I was completely okay with it. It's not something that brought me any sadness. I was just like, okay, like, great, like, goodbye. And I emailed my agency that I was signed with at that time, and I told them, hey, I'm going to go to school for psychology. I will no longer be pursuing acting or social media. So thank you for everything. And I parted ways with them. And guess what? That desire has come back, and I have been able to reach out to them and sign with them again. And of course, they were like, "Oh, welcome back!" Like with like open arms, right? So I'm back to that. I've accepted that is a part of me, and I've been easily able to transition back into that. But imagine, I also live in Los Angeles. If I had decided that I did not want to pursue social media, being an influencer, all of those things, and I moved out of LA, right? That would have been very difficult to undo. Or because if you live in LA, or if you live in any big city, you know what I'm talking about. Once you leave, it is a lot more difficult to come back than it would be if you had never left. And so I'm thankful that I didn't do that. I'm thankful that I didn't make any really concrete decisions that I could not turn back from.